Hello everybody and welcome to Tiger Tales The Lost Stories, a place where you'll find stories and fanfictions written and read to you by your host, me, Tiger. All the stories on this channel are in the first person perspective, and I try to give some really neat, strange tales on this YouTube channel. Today we bring you a new series, and this is a huge collab. This is a collaboration with my good friend Jared, who's the host of If You Give a Dad a Podcast. I was on one of his most recent episodes, and I was a guest, and it was an absolute blast. On that episode, we spoke about how Jared wanted to brand the If You Give a Dad name and brand it to other things, not just podcasting. And it gave me the idea, what if we gave a dad other things from fiction? What exactly would he do? So I started working on the idea, I pitched it to Jared himself, and me and him are now collabing on this series. You see, the ideas are actually Jared's. Whatever happens in this is actually from Jared's mind himself. I just add the Tiger Tales flair, and I write it myself, and then give it to Jared. He's actually going to be reading you this story, which I cannot wait for you guys to listen to. So, with that being said, let's dive in with...
Do you ever wonder what would happen if
you give a dad a
Dragon Dagger.
My name is Jared, and I live in Universe GAD-001. I woke up like it was any normal day. I got dressed, the wife was already in the kitchen making breakfast for the kids. I was in the middle of putting my shoes on when suddenly a loud explosion erupted in the distance. I bolted out of my bedroom and into the backyard where my son, daughter, and wife stood watching the commotion in the background. There we could see the Dragon Zord versus this huge squid monster. We could see them exchanging blows. The squid monster wrapped its gigantic slimy arms around the Dragon Zord and squeezed it tight. Then the monster sent an electricity attack, and the same time the Dragon Zord sent out his own blast. There was another explosion. Boo, my daughter, hid behind my wife, and Connie, my son, hid his face behind his arm. Then suddenly, something came flying toward us, a fastball of fire. "Run, everyone," I called out. Then we all ran as the fiery ball hit the yard, kicked up a ton of dirt as it collided with the ground. Then as the fire calmed down, I gestured the rest of the family to stay back. I inched closer to the ditch and noticed something green, black, and gold shining against the morning sun. I knelt down and reached in and grabbed it. It wasn't hot, surprisingly. I stood up and examined it. It was a dagger. I looked out to where the Zord was fighting and the monster, and there was no sign of either. "Dad, what is it?" Connie asked me with a curious look in his eye. No knives, and this counts," I barked at him. I walked back into the house and placed the strange dagger on my kitchen table. I sat down and stared at it. It was almost humming. I sat there confused. I did not know what to do with this strange weapon on my table. "You cannot leave it there," my wife said as she walked in. "Yeah, I know. Sorry, sweetheart. I'll do something with it," I replied. I stood and picked up the dagger. I took the children to school. The dagger stayed in my bag. I then drove closer to the seaside. I climbed out of my car and walked closer to the ledge, the ocean crashing up the cliff. I stood there, dagger in hand. I thought about throwing it. Just with one quick arm swing, I could have gotten rid of it. I should have gotten rid of it. I looked down at the dagger. It was weightless. I looked at it. I ran my fingers over the flute section. Then an image flashed before my eyes. I saw the Green Power Ranger playing the flute. Then it hit me. I knew I saw this from somewhere. The Green Ranger. The dagger was his weapon. The fight we saw, something must have happened for the dagger to land in my yard. Then I thought maybe I could play it. I held the flute to my mouth and played a note. It was poetic and powerful sounding, and then carried on playing. I then played a tune I had heard before, the tune that was played in the image in my head. Then suddenly, something came bursting from the ocean. It was tall, and it roared a strong, powerful roar. It was the Green Ranger's Dragon Zord. It stood there, staring at me. I looked at it. My mouth dropped open as I gave it an awkward wave.
Hey, I got some things to get done.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like some questionable things that get done.
Ah,
You know.
I get where you're coming from. Wink, wink.
You got someone I can call?
Yeah, dude. I got a number for you. You need it?
Yeah. What is it?
Oh, it's gonna be 14-141-266-10. That is for the Mutants for Hire. They'll get anything done for you.
Can I? So, like, I can get them to do anything I need them to do, right?
No questions asked, as long as they get paid, buddy.
Are their prices reasonable?
Yeah, sure.
How much did you pay?
I paid $10,000, and I didn't have to whack a guy off myself.
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. I'll pay $10,000 not to whack someone off.
It had been several days since I summoned the Dragon Zord. It was an awkward situation. The Dragon Zord eventually went back to hiding in the depths of the ocean after a few moments of me staring at it in awe. I didn't know what to do, or what to say. It was a dragon! Hell, it was a Zord! What was I going to do with a Zord? I told my wife a day later. She spent a little while pacing the house, kind of confused on what to do. She finally told me that we couldn't tell the kids. She was right. They would have wanted to play with it like it was a massive, oversized toy. So I hid it in my closet for just a while till we could figure out what to do with it. Surely there was a way to get rid of it or give it back to the Power Rangers or something. I tried to distract myself with the fact that I had a tool that controlled a weapon strong enough to take down a whole city, locked away in my bedroom. To distract myself, I went to the post office to run an errand for my wife's sticker-making business. I drove into town and parked the car. I stood there for a minute and made sure I had all the parcels. I went inside the post office and sent my wife's parcels. As I left the post office, I saw some guy wearing a black mask, holding a woman's purse, running down the street. 2 police officers ran after him. The thought did ponder in my mind. If I had the Dragon Dagger out now, I could have stopped him robbing whoever he robbed. I could have used the weapon and slapped half of this town's idiots to a place of sense, or summon the Dragon Zord and terrorize the town. Get what I want out of this town, hell, out of this country, but I knew that that was not the move to take. I am not a dictator. I knew my wife and children would not agree with such actions. I have too much riding on me. To try and be a hero, I am not a Power Ranger, just a man who had a powerful weapon. I shook my head and cleared my mind of the thoughts that plagued it, and drove home and walked in the house. "Hey guys, I'm home," I called out. "Hey Dad," Boo cheered as she sat in front of the TV. I walked to the kitchen and found the wife cooking dinner. "All sent off," I said. "Thank you," she replied. "No worries," I replied. "Connie got picked up and is going to get pizza with Danny and the others, and will be dropped off later," my wife explained as she was cutting carrots. "All right, I'm going to go watch TV with Boo unless you need help," I said suggestingly. "No, it's fine. I'm pretty much done," she smiled at me. I joined Boo and sat whilst we watched. An hour went by. Suddenly, there was an almighty roar. It sounded just like the Dragon Zord. I bolted from my chair and headed outside and stood in my driveway and saw the Dragon Zord off in the distance. My wife came out and looked in the far distance, then looked at me with a worried look, then ran back in the house and checked the closet and found the Dragon Dagger missing. "Connie," I muttered. Could my son really have stolen the dangerous thing and taken it with him to impress his friends? "Honey, where is it?" my wife asked as she walked into the room. "Connie must have took it," I sighed. "What? Really? Damn it," my wife blurted. "I gotta find him and stop this," I told her, then gave her a kiss, and then I bolted out of my room. I told Boo to stay inside the house, and I grabbed my car keys and left. I got in my car and headed into town. My wife said Connie and his friends went out for pizza. There was a pizza place not far from the golf fields. That place was huge, a perfect place to summon a Dragon Zord. I started speeding up, breaking the speed limit. The police had to deal with a massive Zord just stood there on the edge of town. They wouldn't mind little old me breaking a few speed limits. I finally got to the golf course, the Dragon Zord now overtowering me. I climbed out of the car and ran down the field, quickly spotting Connie and his friends. I ran down to them and Connie clocked me. "Oh crap, Dad, I'm sorry," Connie yelled. He came up to me and my rage calmed as I was more relieved that he was all right. I hugged him, and then I looked him dead in his eyes. Son, this is dangerous. Those things are not to be played with, I told him. I gathered, Dad, but Danny got the dagger, Connie cried. Okay, listen, I need you to get the other boys away from the big, terrifying sword. I will see if I can talk to Danny, I told my son. Connie nodded at me and then ran to his group of friends and started talking to them. I walked up to Danny. He had the dragon dagger in his grip. He stood close to the Zord and was staring up at it. He looked angry. Hey, Danny, can we talk, bud? I asked him. He turned around to face me. Mr. Rao, did Connie call you? He asked. No, I came as I was worried about him, about all of you, I explained. Why? Worried I'm going to do something dangerous with your new friend? Danny asked, pointing at the dragon Zord. I am kinda, yeah. You can't use the Zord, Danny, I told him. I can save my dad, he barked at me. I then remembered that poor Danny had his father in prison. Apparently he killed a woman on a bus, but it was never proved with hard facts, just loose gossip forced into the judge's decision. I knelt down and placed my hand on Danny's shoulder. Using a Zord and its incredible power to free your father will only result in you eventually being put next to him, and your father would not want that for you, I told him. Danny took a moment to think about it, but finally he held out his hand and passed me the dragon dagger. I took it from him and thanked him. He then ran off and joined Connie and the others. I then took a deep breath and looked up and saw the dragon Zord stood there waiting for a command. I turned around and walked away, but then the boys all called for me. They had gotten onto my car and were pointing at something. I walked over and joined them, and then I followed their point to a group of putties. The strange gray monster things that always attacked the Rangers, circling the Blue Ranger. The group was pretty big. We were on a hill, and we could see the car park at the church from where we were, and the entire park was filled with putties, and the Blue Ranger was at the center of the attacking group. I had to drive past the car park. We could get into trouble. Dad, use the dagger, Connie suggested as he supported himself on the roof of my car. I looked up at him and nodded, and then looked up at the dragon Zord. I need you to help him, okay? I yelled and then played the flute again. The dragon Zord roared a loud, mighty roar, then took several steps forward, covering the distance in a few strides. Then I leaned forward, and a massive blast of flames erupted from its mouth. It scorched the group of putties, burning them to a crisp, leaving the Blue Ranger standing there alone. The Blue Ranger scanned his surroundings and then clocked us, my son and his friends, all waving and calling for the Blue Ranger. Then he came jogging up to us. He came up to me. Hey there, I see you found my friend's dragon dagger, the Blue Ranger said as he pointed at the dagger in my hand. Oh yes, it landed in my yard a few days ago, I told him, and then handed him the dagger. He took it and nodded at me. Thank you, Mr. The Blue Ranger started. Jared, you can call me Jared, I told him. Jared, well thank you, Jared. If this fell into the wrong hands, who knew what could have happened, the Blue Ranger chuckled. It's okay, I looked after it, didn't want anyone getting hurt, I told him, throwing a look at Connie and his friends. Well thank you again. My friend can recover without worry now. I gotta go. The Blue Ranger told us. Then he hit his wrist and teleported away. The boys all waved as the Ranger disappeared with the dragon dagger. The Zord stormed off and disappeared from sight, hiding into the ocean, one could guess. I then turned to the boys. All right, boys, get in the car. I'll drive you boys home, I told them. They all climbed off the car, and Connie walked up to me. I am grounded, aren't I? He asked. What do you think? What do you think your mother's going to say? I asked him with a slight chuckle. I think she'll say it was cool that you saved the Power Rangers, he called out into cheer. Yes, it was pretty cool, I replied. I then climbed into my car and drove the boys home. My wife was indeed angry, but more relieved, and Connie was grounded. I said a month, but if it was up to my wife, it would have been until he graduates. But the whole experience would stay with me for the rest of my life. I handled a Ranger weapon, and I saved the Blue Ranger by controlling a flippin' Dragon Zord. All I know is if anyone ever wondered what happened to me, it's exactly what would happen if you give a dad a dragon dagger.
And there you have it, guys. Another story for the Lost Stories channel and our first installment to this series. A big shout out to Jared for reading the chapter. I'm really proud of the way this came out. And of course, a big shout out to his podcast, If You Give a Dad a Podcast. It was an absolute blast being on his episode, and I really hope I can be a feature on at some point in the next year. He's a very busy man, and he hosts all sorts of guests, from wrestlers to voice actors, from some of the Zero to Hero members. He's even hosted other Zero to Hero members, like Zero to Hero themselves. He's also hosted me and Cosby2037, and Mark the Red Cornish Ranger is going to be a guest on there as well. I cannot wait for you guys to hear what else me and Jared can come up with. But this is also your chance as fans of the Lost Stories channel to join in. You guys can leave comments down below. And if you guys give us suggestions to what I can give Jared in the multiverse, then maybe I can use your suggestions and me and Jared can come up with more fascinating tales. So thank you very much, guys, for tuning into this story. Don't forget to check out the other Tiger Tales. There's Tiger Tales, where you can find all sorts of storylines from Ben 10, Marvel, DC, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and all sorts. Tiger Tales Game Over, where all the stories revolve around video gaming. And Tiger Tales Mysterious Origins, where you can find all sorts of stories where everything began. All my storytelling began with the stories found on that channel. So thank you very much, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Check out If You Give a Dad a Podcast, and of course, I shall see you guys really soon.